Hi, it's Paul. Welcome back to Microsoft Project. In the previous few videos, I built a project. It's a real simple make-believe project for installing a milling machine. And we have there's about 30 tasks. So it's pretty light on detail, but it's enough to check out different features of Microsoft Project. We have different tasks under, I think, 6 different categories, and we have durations for each one. We have predecessors set up, and we have a budget cost for each one. Now, if you're not familiar with project management costing and cost management, I've got some other videos on that, and I suggest you go watch those. For this video, we'll assume that you have a basic understanding of that. What I've done is I've entered values under the cost column. And this is where Microsoft Project gets a little bit complicated. And I've mentioned before that if I click on Add New Column, MS Project has all these different fields that are available. And you can select whichever ones you want. Their help is actually pretty decent. You can just Google what something means. And for example, this BCWP, budget costs of work performed, I believe that stands for. Oh, let me put my cursor. Yeah, budget costs of work performed. You can easily find the definition, different examples of what that is. I'm just going to hide that. But this is kind of where the problem comes in. Microsoft has their version of how projects and how budgets should be tracked. And every organization out there that you may be working for or may work for in the future has their own way of doing it. So if you decide that you're going to track BCWS or whatever those acronyms were, it's probably not going to match what your organization does. So you can spend a whole bunch of time figuring out what those things are and maybe adapting them to what your organization does, but it's kind of tedious. And I find a better way is I take this information now, I move it to Excel, and I do it in Excel the way my organization likes to see it. But let's take a look at a few things that Microsoft Project can do, and there might be some things that are relevant for you in there. Look at what Microsoft Project has for built-in capabilities. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Report, and I'm going to open one of their built-in reports, cash flow. So cash is always important to project managers. And here we can see that we've got 574,000. That's our budget costs that we put in for this project. But we don't have any other information. We don't have any of this ACWP and BCWP. And it doesn't make it very useful for us. I want to go to a different report, go back to reports, and let's go to dashboard and let's look at this burn down. Again, the burn down doesn't really tell us much. Try one more. Maybe cost overview. So again, we've got a little bit of information, maybe a little bit better. This is all our summary categories, so that's kind of neat. But we don't have our baseline cost. And because we don't have a baseline cost, we're not getting any other good information. Okay, we'll go back to the task. And one important thing with Microsoft Project is you first enter your information. So I've got all my tasks and durations and some money under costs, then what you have to do is you have to save that as a baseline. So I'll go to see if I can find it. I think it's under project and set baseline. So I'll click on that and I'll set my baseline. And I'll entire project hit OK. What that's done is that's saved all this information as my baseline information. If I go and update my project, for example, if I change my dollar amount on one of the items or I change the duration, then my new information is different than my baseline information, and I'll be able to look at the variance on that. Okay, let's go back to a report now that we have a baseline. We'll go back to this cost overview. And now I have baseline costs. So that's one important step. Before you can get any good information out of a project, you have to save your information as a baseline. In this view, it didn't really change anything, but it's going to help us in the future. Now I'm going to go through and I'm going to make some of these complete. So what I'll do is I'm going to do it quick. I'll just highlight these guys, go back to task, and I'll make them 100% complete. And you notice on the bar, put a little bar in there. And these guys, I'm going to make those 100% complete too. Okay, now if I go back to my report, I'll go back to the cost overview. Now I'm starting to get some information. Now it says I've got a remaining cost of $45,000. I've spent, what have I spent? Let's scroll down a little bit. And here's my actual costs. So I spent the $500,000 to buy the mill, and I spent $29,000 on delivery, and I still have all these costs outstanding. So now it's starting to give me some good information. It says I'm 35% complete, and I'm not sure what that 35% is, if it's 35% of the time, 35% of the task. It's certainly not 35% of the money. So again, that's another problem with Microsoft Project, is it gives you this information, but it's sometimes a little bit of a search to figure out what that information actually is. Okay, we'll go back to my project. And if I go and change, let me change one of these numbers for installation. I had 10,000, I'm going to change that to 50,000. And now let's go back and look at my report, my cost overview. So now my cost has gone up. My remaining cost has gone up because I added a bunch of money to, maybe I put 500,000 instead of 50,000. I think I messed up on that. Let's go back and look. Yeah, I did 500,000. I was going to do 50,000. Go back to report, cost overview. That looks a little better. So now I've got a few things going on. I've got down here under installation, my baseline cost was $74,500. That's my remaining cost. My baseline was $34,000. And so I've got a $40,000 variance. So now I'm starting to get some good information out of Microsoft Project. Again, it's kind of raw information or raw data that I'm getting from Microsoft Project, and it may or may not be in a format that my organization wants to use. So a lot of times I'm going to use Microsoft Project to generate the information for me, and then I'm going to move it over to Excel so I can present it in a format that I like and in a language that my organization understands. Okay, next we're going to come back and we're going to look at resources, and we're going to start putting resources into our project and see what that does both to our budget tracking and to seeing what resources we need to acquire for the project. That's all for now. Thanks for watching. Bye.